And there's something about the written word that's like, it's a pretty interesting thing to throw into the mix. I know when I first started it was kind of confusing, but then I got really good at it.
The Ethiopian Bible is the oldest Bible. The oldest copy of the Ethiopian Bible, which is full in terms of a Genesis to Revelation copy, is 14th century.
There are 40 days between the resurrection and the ascension. The Western Bible gives that period less than a dozen verses, a few appearances of Jesus, a few short exchanges, and then he is taken up into heaven. Like a chapter closed too quickly. Like someone decided that whatever happened during those 40 days was not worth telling. The Ethiopian Bible gives that period an entire book. That book is called the Book of the Covenant. It claims to record the words Jesus spoke directly to his disciples during the 40 days after the resurrection, before the ascension. Not an excerpt, not a footnote. An entire system of teaching that the Western Church decided its believers did not need to read. And what makes this story impossible to ignore is this. That book was not lost. It was not buried in an archaeological dig and only recently discovered. It had been sitting quietly in Ethiopia for nearly 2,000 years, preserved in monastery libraries in a language Rome could not touch, guarded by monks who understood exactly what they were holding. Mel Gibson read it, and he could not stop talking about what it contained. Ethiopian tradition says it directly. The way the Western Bible frames those 40 days is a deception. Those days were not a quiet ending. They were the climax, the moment when Jesus delivered everything his entire mission had been building toward. The manuscripts call what was taught during this period the Heavenly Scrolls, a complete separate system of teaching about the spiritual architecture of the universe, about the coming corruption of the church, and about the final awakening of humanity. And what he says in those teachings is not gentle. It is not comfortable. It is not something any established religious institution would want its followers to hear. In the Book of the Covenant, Jesus does not speak like a humble carpenter. He speaks like the sovereign king of heaven and earth. He commands his disciples to build the kingdom of heaven, but not through armies, not through political alliances, not through wealth. Only the Holy Spirit, he says, will be their power. And what happens inside one single human heart? He teaches, matters more than every stone temple ever built. Then come the warnings. Jesus tells his disciples that over time, people will twist his words until they are no longer recognizable. They will shout his name in the streets while their hearts remain empty. They will build enormous temples of gold and marble, but forget the only temple that matters, the temple inside the human soul. Religious institutions will rise in his name, carry his image, speak his language, and do the complete opposite of everything he stood for. He foretells wars launched under his banner, the Crusades, the Inquisitions, entire civilizations crushed in the name of a man who said to love your enemies. He warns of an age when lies are treated as truth, and truth is treated as heresy. And then he says this, darkness will come when people no longer recognize my voice. That line is not prosperity gospel. It is not a promise of comfort or reward. This is a Jesus who walks with the forgotten, with those who believe deeply and never speak loudly, with those the world steps over without looking back. What matters here is this. This is not an internet conspiracy theory. This is serious academic research carried out by some of the world's leading scholars. Dr. Getachew Hale, one of the most versatile scholars of Ethiopian manuscripts, spent years at the Hill Manuscript Library in Minnesota cataloging and translating these texts. His research confirms that the Book of the Covenant was not a medieval fabrication. It has deep roots in early Christian communities, and Ethiopian scribes treated it with the same reverence they gave to the four canonical Gospels. Professor Robert Gilbert, the manuscript historian who cataloged Ethiopian texts at the Bodleian Library in Oxford, described the preservation effort as extraordinary. The monks at Debre Damo, a monastery that can only be reached by climbing a rope up a vertical cliff, deliberately chose isolation to protect these writings from destruction. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, the Ethiopian-born scholar who founded the Department of African American Studies at Harvard, spent decades translating Ge'ez manuscripts. He said it plainly. Ethiopia preserved an independent Christian tradition that developed without Roman interference, and that tradition contained scriptures the Western world chose to reject. Until his death, he argued that the Ethiopian canon represents one of the most important and most overlooked collections of early Christian writing. The texts were there. The words were there. The rest of the world simply could not reach them until now. To understand why these texts survived, you have to understand what kind of country Ethiopia is. Ethiopia was never colonized. That is not historical exaggeration. While nearly every other African nation had its culture, language, and spiritual traditions erased by European powers, Ethiopia stood alone. No foreign empire imposed its version of Christianity on Ethiopian soil. Not Rome, not Britain, no one. That simple truth is the reason these texts still exist today. Every other nation that fell under colonial rule either had its native spiritual traditions erased or was pulled into the Rome-approved, sanitized version of Christianity. The original voices were silenced. Ethiopia's were not. While the Roman Empire decided which books belonged in the Bible at the Council of Nicaea in the year 325 AD, Ethiopia operated independently. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church formed its own canon, 81 books in the broader version, 72 books in the narrower version, officially recognized by Emperor Haile Selassie. Both include texts Rome rejected, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and writings that record what Jesus taught during those 40 days. These books were written in Ge'ez, an ancient liturgical language that almost no one outside Ethiopia could read. For centuries, those words remained in cliffside monasteries, copied by hand by monks who believed every syllable was sacred. Professor Paolo Marasini, the Italian philologist who spent his career at the University of Florence studying Ge'ez literature, argued that the Didascalia and related Ethiopian texts represent an orthodox stream of early Christian thought that was systematically pushed aside. Not because it was heresy, because it was inconvenient. Heresy means false. Inconvenient means threatening to power. Those are not the same thing. If the Book of the Covenant reads like a prophecy, then the Didascalia reads like an indictment. This Ethiopian text gives direct, practical instructions on how to live as a true follower of Christ. Live simply, fast regularly, pray constantly, and stay away from corrupt leaders who exploit believers. The language is so direct that it almost feels rough. Jesus warns specifically against religious authorities who present themselves as holy while secretly destroying the lives of ordinary people. One passage says, "Do not be like the scribes of the future, who wear white robes but devour the homes of the poor," written centuries ago, describing a pattern that has repeated itself in every generation since. Ethiopian scholars point to 3 specific reasons why the Western Church rejected these texts, and none of those reasons is because the texts were false. The first reason is political control. Rome needed a simplified Bible that could be managed from the center. Fewer books meant fewer questions. A community that cannot access the full text is a community that must rely on the institution to explain everything. The second reason is mysticism. Ethiopian scriptures are filled with angelic encounters, demonic warfare, and spiritual battles in unseen dimensions. Western leaders saw that material as dangerous because it could too easily inspire believers to seek God directly, without institutional supervision, without priests standing between them and the divine. The third reason, and the most revealing one, is fear. If ordinary people heard these teachings unedited, they might stop relying on priests and bishops entirely to mediate their relationship with God. And an institution that can no longer place itself between the believer and God has no power left to sell. The most radical territory in the Ethiopian Bible is not political. It is internal. In these texts, Jesus speaks about death in a way most Western Christians have never encountered. He says the body is like an old, worn-out garment, but the soul continues, returning to its true home in the fire and light of God. The disciples are terrified, but Jesus tells them their fear is aimed at the wrong thing. The truly frightening thing, he says, is not physical death. It is living without spirit. He calls this walking death while the heart still beats. A person can be physically alive, but completely empty inside, cut off from the divine light, filling the emptiness with noise, possessions, and pride, having forgotten that the presence of God already lived within them. He tells the disciples to pray with their whole being, not just with words. Let the body become a living prayer. Let your silence speak louder than sermons. Then he warns that his legacy will be corrupted. His words will be changed. His image will be repainted to serve the powerful. His name will be sold like a product. Look around and tell me he was wrong. Television preachers, megachurches with private jets, theological systems designed to make the poor feel responsible for their poverty and the rich feel blessed because of their wealth. He saw it all. He named it all centuries before it happened in a text that was later quietly removed from the Bible before most of the Western world could read it. Dr. Kirsten Pedersen, the Danish scholar who spent years living in Ethiopian monastic communities and studying their manuscripts directly, described these passages as representing a form of Christianity far more inward and far more demanding than anything preserved in the Western tradition. The monks she worked with did not treat these teachings as ancient relics, but as living instructions, as urgent today as the day they were first spoken. The Ethiopian texts say that before the Ascension, Jesus gave what they call his final prophecy. And according to people familiar with Gibson's research, this is the passage that captured the director's attention more than any other in the Ethiopian manuscripts. It reads as if it were written yesterday. Jesus says a time will come when love disappears from the earth. Faith will become performance. People will worship with open mouths and closed hearts. Religion will become a costume people wear instead of a fire that transforms them. Entire generations will grow up inside institutions built in his name and never once touch the living truth. He died to deliver. But even in that spiritual desert, he promises that his spirit will return, not in cathedrals, not through powerful institutions. Inside the quiet ones, the broken ones, the overlooked ones, my spirit will move into places religion cannot reach. The proud will not see it, but the broken will. They will know me not through words, but through fire. This fire, the Ethiopian texts explain, is not destruction, it is awakening. It burns away falsehood and pride like a furnace refining metal, destroying everything false until only what is real remains. Jesus says this fire will return before the end of all things, and when it comes, it'll separate those who truly seek the truth from those who simply wear it like a mask. A world drowning in greed, performative virtue, and spiritual emptiness, yet at the same time starving for something real, something that cannot be bought, cannot be branded, cannot be controlled, something no algorithm can manufacture and no institution can stop. The prophecy does not describe some distant age, it describes this age. And here is what the texts say about who carries the fire when institutions enter darkness. Not the theologians, not the megachurch pastors, not the people with the loudest voices and the biggest platforms. The Ethiopian texts are specific. It is the people no one notices, the people crushed by life but still holding on to faith, the people who pray in secret and never perform it, the people who were told they were not good enough and still believe in something greater than themselves. Jesus calls them the remnant, the ones the fire finds first. And then comes the line Gibson is said to have read again and again more than any other passage in the Ethiopian manuscripts. Truth can never die. I am the seed and the sword. I will return. The implications are overwhelming. The Western biblical canon is not complete. Entire dimensions of Christ's message were hidden from billions of people across dozens of generations. And the oldest, most unconquered Christian tradition, the one never brought under Roman control, quietly held the truth while the rest of the world was told not to ask questions. For centuries, monks climbed ropes up vertical cliffs to reach isolated monasteries, copied those words by hand in a language no colonizer could read, and passed them from generation to generation, not as historical artifacts, as living truth. Mel Gibson, who spent more than $30 million of his own money to make The Passion of the Christ, the most historically researched biblical film ever produced, has spoken publicly about pre-Nicene sources, texts that existed before Rome standardized the Bible. And according to people close to his production team for the upcoming film The Resurrection of the Christ, Gibson has been deeply researching these Ethiopian manuscripts. The 40 days fully covered by the Book of the Covenant are exactly the period around which his next film is built. That is not a coincidence. That is a man who found something and could not look away. The question is why an institution that claims to represent the teachings of Jesus would suppress the words he supposedly actually spoke? What kind of power structure benefits from a community hearing only half the message? And what happens to that power structure when the full message finally reaches the light? The monks on the Ethiopian cliffs have always known the answer. They were simply patient enough to wait for the rest of the world to be ready to hear it. In 2027, for the first time in history, that answer will have a chance to echo across the world's biggest screen.